It's hard to find an opening to my story. A tale of a small cog in the history of our region. I can only write my own private memories of these 3 years of hope and anguish. Is this a tale of triumph or defeat? The ending to our story has not yet been written.
This is obviously shit. לא יאמינו שאני כל כך מטופש, אה?
Perhaps I should start with the one decisive Wednesday, on July 92, when Professor Hirschfeld called me up with a dangerous proposition, joining him for a secret meeting with our sworn enemies, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, known to all as the PLO.
جنبا إلى جنب مع الثورة الفلسطينية ضد العدو الصهيوني. فلسطين وكل فلسطين عربية 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 عربية.
The PLO were a terrorist organization led by Yasser Arafat, a man many Israelis considered Hitler's successor. Arafat believed in armed struggle, fighting for Palestinian freedom. He took pride in the slaughter of the athletes in the Munich Olympics, opening fire on schoolchildren in Ma'alot, and planting deadly bombs all over Israel. The problem was, Arafat was the only one who Palestinians looked up to. He had the final say on all negotiations, but Israel refused to talk to him.
אני נגד מדינה פלסטינאית אש"פיסטית בין ישראל ובין ירדן. בשום פנים לא, ולכן בשום פנים לא משא ומתן עם אש"ף.
9 months ago, Rabin was elected to lead Israel on a platform of peace and security. But as the months went by, he delivered neither. As the terror attacks were on the rise and the peace process was deadlocked, Rabin's right-wing opposition rose in the polls and threatened to overrun him before he even completed his first year in office.
החודש נרצחו 10 ישראלים. האופוזיציה קוראת למר רבין להתפטר.
גם אם טעיתי בלוח הזמנים, לא טעיתי ולא אטעה במטרה.
יצרת ציפיות שאתה ידעת שאתה לא יכול להגשים אותן.
אל תדאג, אגשים אותם ולו גם בלוח זמנים מאוחר יותר. אני מאמין שנעבור את התקופה הקשה הזאת, וב-93 נראה שינוי משמעותי, הן מדיני והן ביטחוני.
In a desperate attempt to renew the peace talks, Professor Hirschfeld decided to act outside the law and set up a secret back channel to negotiate with the PLO. If we get caught, Hirschfeld said, we will be charged with treason and espionage, and probably end up in jail. Sounds like a sweet offer, I winked at Hirschfeld.
We were in a very strange situation. Legally, the law forbids us to come into contact with the Palestinians. I thought this is foolish. If you don't go to contact the Palestinians, what are you going to do? And terror was very painful. I mean, bombs in cars, in buses, all over the world. They were very active. They had quite an organization of terror.
The Oslo process, which I like to call the accidental channel, was neither pre-planned nor pre-programmed. My own partial involvement began in December '92, when I was sent by the PLO to Norway to meet secretly with two Israeli professors. On my long flight from Tunisia to Oslo, I remember the day I was forced to flee my home in Abu Dis when the PLO was declared illegal. I left my family and home behind under the oppressive occupation of the Israeli army and swore I'd return the day we were liberated. In the past 25 years, Rabin was known to us as the bone breaker, the architect of the iron fist policy of repression. The idea of meeting our occupiers face to face did not appeal to me at all. But the freedom of Palestine demanded all of us to take high risks.
שלום רב, 3 חיילי צה"ל שנהרגו אתמול בעזה הובאו היום למנוחות. פורק ושלום מטען חבלה שהיה מונח בתוך שקית מתחת לספסל בתחנת אוטובוס ברמלה. על רצועת עזה הוטל לפנות בוקר סגר ויימשך כמה ימים. הרצועים נרחבים ברצועה
To muddy our tracks, we informed the university we would take part in an academic summit held by the Norwegians. We were supplied with fake pamphlets and a made-up schedule, which was a complete lie. The pamphlets never stated that the summit will consist of only 5 participants, 2 Israelis and 3 Palestinians from Tunis. As we approached the secluded villa, hidden deep within a Norwegian forest, a chill ran through my spine. Negotiating with terrorists was one thing in theory, but now I was just hoping that we didn't make a terrible mistake. Our first handshake was rather tense. I scanned the people in front of me and matched their faces to the memos we had prepared back home. Abu Allah served as the Palestinian Minister of Finance. Beside him sat Maher el-Kurd, Arafat's confidant. The youngest of the group was Hassan Asfour, a militant communist who was the most aggressive of the 3. The Palestinians wanted to know who we were and who we represented, but all we could say was that we were 2 professors who were here against the law.
The morning started bad. The morning started bad. Abu Allah said, we Palestinians understand how difficult it was to live under Nazi occupation in Norway. Usually understand how difficult it was to live, for us to live under Israeli occupation. And if he would have wanted to say something more irritating me and more getting me up, like certain things you're not allowed to do. If you really think that there's any comparison between Israelis and Palestinians and the Nazis, if you ever say this again, I'm going to stand out and move out. It never came back. It never came back again. And I think this was it was a very unpleasant start, but it was an important start.
We knew that all past negotiations had been fruitless, and in order to tempt Rabin, we had to come up with a completely new offer. To be perfectly honest, I said, we are standing on the verge of a new war, which will harm both sides. We are serious in reaching an understanding with you, and are open for a historic compromise. Until now, we have demanded your immediate withdrawal from the occupied territories, but we realize it won't happen overnight. Arafat wants to bring up the possibility of withdrawal from the Gaza Strip as a first step toward peace.
Hirschfeld and I exchanged glances. Although we were trying to conceal them, we were stunned. The PLO was considered an extremist group, and here was Arafat's messenger with a game-changer solution.
Did you trust the Israelis from the beginning?
It is not easy to say that when you start talking with your enemy that you trust. But if you want peace, you should convince yourself to trust. And later on, by experience, you can say that's serious or not. The guys which we met, whether Hirschfeld or Pandit, Seems to me after more than a meeting, they were serious.
When the meeting was over, Hirschfeld and I retreated to our rooms to compose the first draft of the developing proposal. We began by nervously typing the words Gaza first on a Norwegian letterhead so that if it leaked, Israel could deny its existence.
נכנסנו בכלל לאוסלו בתקופה הכי גרועה, בתקופה של ניתוק היחסים באופן מוחלט בין ישראל ובין הפלסטינאים. אין משא ומתן, הארץ בוערת, האינתיפאדה חוזרת. האלימות נכנסת עכשיו בשיאים חדשים, כבר זה לא האינתיפאדה הרגילה, זה אינתיפאדה אלימה עם מוות של אנשים. ואנחנו בתחושה באמת שהעסק הזה בוער, אבל יש לנו איזשהו פתרון. נפגשים אנשי אש"ף ופתאום מגלים שיש פרטנר.
Now we were left with the most difficult task of all, presenting the draft to the decision makers.
The big tension was how would Peres take it, but more than that, how would Rabin take it? I was almost sure that once Peres takes it to Rabin, Rabin will throw him away. So I told Peres, I sent Yair Hirschfeld and Ron Pundak to Oslo to meet some PLO people. And after some meetings, they have this paper, and I really want you to look at it and decide what we are doing with it. So, okay, thank you. Then next day, I'm asking him, Shimon, did you read the paper? He said, no, and I saw it. Another day, did you read the paper? No, I didn't. And then he read it. And then he understood that he had something explosive in his hand.
No, I didn't take it seriously. I didn't take it seriously. The draft wasn't dwelt in my eyes, I think, not at all. The important fact was the discovery of Abu Allah. A plan without Abu Allah, you had many plans like it. Brit Shalom, full. I take the papers, they're full of plans. I don't think that there are any region in the world that has so many plans with so little results in the Middle East.
As the wave of terror engulfed the streets, the protests outside the homes of Rabin and Peres became routine. The two leaders were stuck between a rock and a hard place. They were losing their war against terror, and the peace process showed no signs of revival. Perhaps the Oslo Channel was their only way out. With a heavy heart, they authorized us to continue the talks, as long as we exercised every precaution to keep the news from leaking. If it became known we were deliberating with the PLO, it would be their last day in office. Now that the leaders were involved, we were no longer in the driver's seat. Peres announced that the Oslo Channel will now be led by Uri Savir, the Director General of the Foreign Ministry, and Joel Zinger, a rigid military lawyer.
Now we are bringing a military lawyer. Bam, 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 bam. Former colonel that was dealing with the law in the West Bank and Gaza. And I come there to meet with the PLO, terrorists, murderers. So from my perspective, it was like a theater. As I go into the room and see Abu Allah the first time, he comes to me and kisses me on both cheeks. A terrorist is kissing me. Oh my God, I've been kissed by a terrorist. And probably he thought, I just kissed a former military. I mean, men don't kiss one another in the United States or in Israel. That was the first time a man kissed me.
Before the first round of talks, I decided to get acquainted with my counterpartner, Abu Allah. Where are you from? He asked. Jerusalem, I replied. I am also from Jerusalem, he said. Where is your father from? He was born in Germany. My father was born in Jerusalem and still lives there, he said. We can go all the way back to King David, I replied, and didn't try to conceal my anger. I am sure we could argue about the past for years and never reach an agreement. Let's try and see if we can agree on the future. All right, he said, and we reach our first mutual understanding. We won't argue about the past ever again.
אנחנו עוסקים בשני עמים אחרי עימות ומלחמה, המון חשדנות. אנחנו חשנו בצדק שהעם הפלסטיני, האומה הערבית רוצה לשלוח אותנו לים, למחוק את מדינת ישראל, ותקפו אותנו וגרמו לנו סכנת קיום. הם חשים ששלטנו בהם והשפלנו אותם 25 שנה. לא חשוב בצדק או לא בצדק. זאת התחושה. יש כאן פצעים עמוקים ופחדים עמוקים. ונצטרך להתגבר על זה.
Zinger started the meeting by announcing that we had a real concrete proposal for the signed agreement. All trace of our optimistic document was erased and was replaced by Rabin's agenda that put security and defense before cooperation and coexistence. Rabin had refused to deliberate on the core issues of the conflict, demanding to discuss them at a later stage. His offer did not include any mention of uprooting settlements, dividing Jerusalem, the return of the Palestinian refugees, and definitive borders. As the reading commenced, the Palestinians' astonishment grew. After a few minutes, Abu Allah turned to us four and muttered quietly in Arabic, "It's a massacre."
The last round of talks left me more confused than ever. Despite Zinger's humiliating offer, it was clear we are now in the major leagues. It was no longer an initiative of two peace-loving professors, but of Rabin and Peres themselves. All the while, the news painted an entirely different picture. Rabin tightened his fist. Every day, demonstrators were being killed throughout Palestine. Some of them innocent kids. Who should we believe? The reality on TV or his promises?
אני מבין את הכאב, את הדאגה ואת הזעם. כי אכן אנו נמצאים בתקופה קשה של הסלמת הטרור הפלסטיני. בחודש האחרון נרצחו 15 ישראלים. קיבלנו את ההחלטות הבאות. ראשית, להטיל סגר על יהודה ושומרון בנוסף לסגר על עזה. החל ממחר, לא יהיו פלסטינאים תושבי השטחים בשטחה הריבוני של מדינת ישראל עד להודעה חדשה.
The next rounds of talks had been an epic battle over the text of the agreement. Both parties, unwilling to compromise, appeared to be heading for a final showdown. We all stuck to our guns, as our leaders had instructed us. I found it hard to remember to eat. At times, I had to remember to breathe. On the 11th round in Oslo, we arrived with a proposition of our own. Perhaps Zinger and the Israeli delegation thought we would surrender to their terms, but that would not be the case. Our revised proposition stated the end goal will be the UN Resolution 242, demanding Israel's withdrawal from the occupied territories.
The Palestinian proposition enraged me, and I responded with outright opposition. We will not acknowledge Resolution 242 because it means retreating to the 67 borders, and we refuse to discuss borders at this stage. We started believing the PLO were our partners in this initiative, but when we put our cards down, the PLO always seems to back away from any clear decision. Maybe people were right saying that the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity.
There was a lot of tension, people walking out of the room, slamming the doors, but it was all a game. You know, we knew that they are desperate to reach an agreement. I just said, let them, we need to let it all play out, and then we will just say no.
The Israelis dismissed our proposition, refusing to discuss the definitive borders at this stage. I said to Uri, you refuse to recognize our national rights and insist on retaining all the settlements. We prefer to wait another 10 years for a reasonable offer. Uri fired back. In that case, you will keep waiting for the Messiah to arrive. I said to Uri, we have made every possible effort to reach a peace agreement with you. But unfortunately, I now find myself unable to go on. I have decided to resign from the talks.
The room fell silent. A dark expression spread across Abu Allah's face, and he seemed powerless as he rose to his feet and left the room. This time, it was really over.
Within myself, my feelings were mixed. For years, we have fought for freedom on all of Palestine, but now we were offered peace with heavy compromises. The weight on my shoulders had become unbearable. Will I fail my people by abandoning peace or by abandoning the struggle?
שאל אותי פעם אבו עלה, הוא אומר, תשמע, אני לא מבין אתכם. אתם מעצמה אדירה, אולי הצבא השלישי הרביעי גדול בעולם. במה אנחנו איום קיומי עליכם ולא להפך? וחשבתי ושבתי לו, אתם האתגר שהיה חוד החנית של המאמץ הערבי לדחות אותנו מהאזור, כי אתם רציתם להיות איפה שאנחנו. ואחרי השיחה הזאת התחלנו לדבר על הכרה הדדית.
Uri asked me how I was feeling. I didn't hide my emotions. Both sides are stubborn and do not grasp the importance of the moment. I just cannot continue this negotiation.
I told Abu Allah, if you can't cure the illness, we must find its cause. Let's put aside the maps and the agreements and begin with recognizing each other as partners. The PLO will denounce all terror attacks against Israel, and we will stop viewing you as terrorists and allow Arafat to return to his homeland.
I promised Uri I would present his mutual recognition proposal to Arafat in Tunis. Perhaps this round of talks wasn't a complete failure after all.
I understand that you were born in Abu Dis and you left this area many years ago. Do you dream about your coming back to your home?
That's my dream in all the period which I was so far from it. Yeah.
To go back?
Exactly.
And what to do?
To live there as a citizen. And it's too much for me.
We were negotiating in Oslo in complete secrecy. No one knew about it outside of this very small group. And then, when we were in Oslo, suddenly it leaked out. The story leaked out.
השיחות הסודיות בין אש"ף לישראל העירו את אוסלו המושלגת מתרדמת יום ראשון. הן תפסו הרבה כותרות ומעט מידע של ממש. שכן עד לזמן עריכת הכתבה מיקומן ותוכנן אינם ידועים. בשגרירות ישראל היא שממה מוחלטת. המאבטחים נשבעו שכלל לא ידעו על קיום השיחות, שלא לדבר על מיקומן. התחנה האחרונה בחיפושנו אחר השיחות הסודיות היא כאן בארמון המלך. ככל שידיעתנו מגעת, גם כאן הם לא נמצאים.
ערב טוב לך, סגן שר החוץ יוסי ביילין, באולפן איתי בתל אביב. האם ההכרה של ממשלת ישראל, של ראש הממשלה ואש"ף, בעצם רשמית?
לא ידוע לי על הכרה כזאת, אין הכרה כזאת. The worst thing that could happen was the premature exposure of the channel. Reporters kept calling me, and I consistently denied everything without giving any unnecessary explanations. But I knew we couldn't keep up this charade much longer. It was only a matter of time until the Likud used the talks to make Rabin and Peres seem like traitors who were conspiring with the murderous Arafat.
לכו אל העם, תאמרו את האמת, תגידו זאת כוונתנו, למסור את ליבה של ארצנו לערפאת, להקים שם מדינה פלסטינית. לכו אל העם ולכו אל העם לפני שתבצעו את הדבר.
We were trying to beat the clock by reaching an agreement before a premature leakage would stop the Oslo Agreement.
The mutual recognition option excited the leadership in Tunis, and I was sent back to Oslo with Arafat's support. It seemed as if the Israelis returned with a deep desire to move forward as well.
אתם יושבים שם, באותו בית הערכה שהעיתונות עשתה אותו למין טירת חלומות כזאת, אבל זה דרכה של עיתונות. זה חודש קשה מאוד. יש כמה וכמה מעשי טרור. נכון. ואתם יושבים לכם שם, אתה מדבר על אווירה עניינית. מאוד. ג'נטלמנית. מאוד. בדיחות. צריך. זה מנותק.
זה לא מנותק. אנחנו מחליטים שמה שאנחנו מתעלמים מההווה, אנחנו לא שוכחים את העבר. אנחנו מנסים לשים אותם רגע הצידה ולחשוב ביחד איך לא נעשה את העבר טוב יותר, אלא איך ננסה לעשות את העתיד טוב יותר. ואז אתה סוגר את עצמך באיזו מין בועה. אתה לא מתנתק לרגע, לא מה שקרה ליהודים, לא מה שקרה לערבים, לא מה שקורה באותו רגע. אבל אתה אומר, בואו נפעיל את מקסימום הכוח בכדי לנסות להזיז את התהליך הזה.
The next day, we started with a crucial debate. We zeroed in on the difficult problems first. Terms moved from line to line. Substitute words replaced problematic ones. Unnecessary sentences were tossed into the large draft bin. Although it was clear that there was only one pathway that would lead to peace between the two nations, each side feared the reaction of its people when they'd be presented with an agreement that included painful concessions. Abu Allah would be considered a traitor for signing an agreement that abstained discussing the fate of the settlements. And I didn't want to know what names we'd be called when it became known that the Oslo team had divided up the Holy Land.
We managed to progressively narrow down the differences to 5 open issues. And we went back and forth and back and forth. And early in the morning, 4 in the morning, we reached full agreement on those 5 issues.
At 5 a.m., the Norwegian sprinter delivered the final draft of the Declaration of Principles for Peace between Israel and the PLO. It stated that as a first step, Israel would withdraw from Gaza and Jericho and grant the Palestinians authority for self-governance. In the second stage, which would take place within a year, the Palestinians' authority would expand to most of the West Bank. And within 5 years, a permanent peace treaty will be signed, addressing the core issues of settlements, Palestinian refugees, definitive borders, and Jerusalem.
הדבר מוזר, היינו 15 אנשים, אחרי מאות שעות משא ומתן, סגורים בחדר קטן וחותמים בראשי תיבות. והעולם לא יודע. הפער הזה של אותה אינטימיות בתוך חדר קטן של מעט אנשים, של הסכם שהוא מהווה פריצת דרך כזו, בסודיות כזו, לא הייתה הרגשה של אופוריה או של שמחה, אלא של אפילו איזו מכבדות, מוזרות.
I cried this week twice. The first time at 5 o'clock. After we finished, really we cried. We congratulated each other. And at that time we said, now we have to start the big battle for development, for construction, for cooperation. The battle of peace has started today. We are for it, and it must be won by both of us. Thank you very much.
And voila, we were introduced as enemies. We came with goodwill, yet with no few prejudice. And we found men of truth, of courage, and of depth. You are the neighbors we wish to live with. Palestinian friends, today may mark the end of our conflict. In our long days and nights, we all spoke with great love about our children. It is to them that we dedicate this document.
Good evening. Israel and the PLO are not far from a historic embrace tonight.
I remember there was a TV set with multiple stations, Norwegian, Swedish, Finnish, and everyone was talking in incomprehensible words, foreign languages. Oslo, PLO, Oslo, PLO.
Fatah-bevægelsen under PLO har I dag godkendt aftalen.
And it was all over the world, and that was stunning to suddenly realize that, wow, we caused this. It's us that they are talking about.
29 years after declaring Israel an illegal state, the Palestine Liberation Organization has decided to recognize Israel's right to exist peacefully. And after decades of calling the PLO a terrorist organization, Israel finally recognizes the PLO as the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. Given the history of the Palestinians and the Israelis, which has involved so much of the rest of the world, it is, in a word, staggering.
The last-minute negotiations went on for a day and a half, non-stop. But when the haggard Norwegian mediator arrived in Tunis, he said he had the historic documents of recognition in his bag. The success wasn't his doing, he said modestly, but belonged to Israeli Prime Minister Rabin and PLO Chairman Arafat. In the one-page letter from Arafat to Rabin, the PLO recognizes the right of the State of Israel to exist in peace and security. In his return letter to Arafat, Rabin says that in view of those commitments, the government of Israel has decided to recognize the PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people.
How was the atmosphere yesterday in Tunis?
They were a little bit tense, but I think very committed to, they had made the leap, you know, they decided to jump. And I think it's the first time that they're in this situation that rather than trying to maintain consensus, they cut consensus in order to make a deal. So it's a different mode.
Mm-hmm.
I want to tell you that this is a day I never expected to see, that our government would recognize a terrorist, murderous organization.
In the Middle East today, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin will fly to Washington for the signing ceremony of the Oslo Agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. Yasser Arafat will arrive from Tunis for the signing, which will be his first visit to America since the PLO were denied entrance to the US. Right-wing opponents are calling the signing of the treaty treason, while Arab opposition is calling Arafat a traitor to the Palestinian cause, and threats have been made on his life.
From the perspective of an American diplomat, these were the best days of my life, because there was something actually being consummated. An agreement was actually about to be signed. So sure, there were last-minute difficulties. Would Arafat come with his uniform on? Would he have a gun in his holster? How do you avoid kissing Arafat when he shakes your hand? I mean, the lesson that we gave to Warren Christopher, which is you take the person by the hand, and with your other hand, you hold his elbow. And in effect, that becomes your distance, where if he starts to come forward at you, you don't have to push him away, he's just away already.
Well, in my last meeting with Clinton, just before the celebration started, he took me aside and said he wanted 2 concessions. I said, Mr. Clinton, we gave enough concessions. He said, no, these are personal. He said, concession 1, could you prevail on Mr. Arafat to come dressed in a French suit and abandon his military garb? I said, this was part of the way his people view him. So I said, I'm sorry, I can't give you that concession. What's the second one? So he said, no hugging, no kissing. And I said, this is a very tough concession, but for peace, I'll do it.
They brought the morning shows to the White House today. Tucked away at the bottom of the South Lawn were Charlie and Paula and Bryant and Katie. Sure signs that history was about to be made.
The people are rejoicing, celebrating the occasion, and that they are waving olive branches and they are singing, and they sent us a message of solidarity.
Do you realize what's going on today here?
What is going on?
Do you understand the situation?
The Palestinian state is emerging.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Arafat, Chairman of the Executive Council of the Palestine Liberation Organization, His Excellency Yitzhak Rabin, Prime Minister of Israel, the President of the United States.
Yitzhak didn't want to come to Washington. He says, I don't want to see Arafat. The one that convinced him to stand up with Arafat was Clinton. And as you saw the picture, Clinton holds the 2 of them, always by force. Finally, Yitzhak shook the hands of Arafat. He turned to me and he says, now it's your time. to shake his hands. He went through the hell. Now I have to go through the hell. It was very difficult for him.
Well, why do you think it was so difficult for him?
Because he was against the PLO, because his heart wasn't there, because he saw in Arafat a terrorist. But, you know, I cannot change the past of anybody. Finally, Yitzhak said it, you make peace with your enemies, not with your friends.
To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace. Ladies and gentlemen, the time for peace has come.
Do you feel proud?
I feel proud, but I am afraid.
Of what?
Of the failure.
Why?
Therefore, because we are still in the beginning, in the start.
But you are so optimistic.
I should be, but at the same time, also on my side, I feel afraid. Because both of us should work very, very, very hard. And we should trust each other more and more and more. Without a trust, we cannot continue.
After the ceremony, when the crowd started to disperse, I spotted Abu Ala with a group of Palestinian officials. I walked towards him, and he shot me an embarrassed look. We were no longer protected by the intimacy of Oslo, but trapped in plain sight and suddenly feeling alienated. At that moment, we turned from secret partners to members of opposing teams.
When you shook hands with Mr. Rabin, it looked like it was your idea, not his.
He hesitated a little bit, but I insisted, and I continued stretching my hand to him.
Now, looking at the longer term, do you recognize that if Mr. Rabin has his way, Jerusalem, as he puts it, will never be the capital of a Palestinian state? Do you recognize that? Do you accept that?
He said Jerusalem, not unified Jerusalem. Yes?
He said Jerusalem?
Yes. He's a politician. He knows exactly what he is saying.
The Israelis will never pull back from Jerusalem. They never will they? Do you believe they ever will?
Yeah, I think if there is a will, there is a way.
But there isn't a will on their side.
Who knows? Who knows? Some weeks ago, nobody was imagining that we'll find a solution and this agreement. Not to forget that Berlin Wall had fallen.
This is IBA Radio from Jerusalem, and here are the news. 1 month after the historic signing in Washington, Israel and the Palestinians gather once again for a round of negotiations, this time to implement the first stage of the Oslo Accord, Israel's withdrawal from Gaza and Jericho. The negotiations will be led by Israeli Deputy Chief of Staff Amnon Shahak, and on the Palestinian side, Nabil Shat, Arafat's chief advisor.
How significant is it? How important?
This is the implementation of the agreement. This is the most important part of our agreement.
But how important is it to the succession of the whole process?
If we succeed,
the whole thing will succeed, and we will succeed. My first meeting with General Amnon Shahak was quite pleasant, in fact. The man very modestly came to me and said, Dr. Shahak, here is my speech. And you know, I have never given speeches before. I am a straight military man. So why don't you look into that speech? I felt that this was really very modest and very positive starting point. But between that first meeting and the second meeting, which came out after the weekend and so on, 4 or 5 days later, I went through Google and other sources to find out about General Amnon Lipkin Shahak. And I found he was part of the raiding party that killed 3 of my dearest friends in Beirut. And I thought about it, and I said, I'm sorry, I cannot get myself to negotiate with you. I mean, it's very difficult. These were very close friends of mine. They're brothers. And I don't know, I don't feel like it's fair to negotiate with you. So Amnon Shahak said, but Nabil, we are here so that we will never repeat that.
On February 19th, Nabil Shahak and General Shahak presented us with the first draft of the Gaza-Jericho Agreement. The draft was clearly pro-Israeli, but promised us rewards we didn't dream of just a year ago, such as passports, an international airport in Jericho, and for the first time in history, democratic Palestinian elections. We were on the right path, but our utopian bubble was destined to shatter violently.
שלום רב לכם, הטבח בחברון, עשרות פלסטינים נורו למוות מאש של מתנחל אחד לפחות, בתפילת הבוקר במערת המכפלה.
At 5 a.m. on Friday, February 25th, Dr. Baruch Goldstein, a religious settler dressed in his army uniform, grabbed an Uzi submachine gun and opened fire on the people in prayer at the Cave of the Patriarchs. 31 people were murdered during the massacre that ended only when Goldstein himself was killed. The news spread quickly, and violent riots broke out across the entire occupied territories. Israeli soldiers opened fire on the protesters, killing 9 Palestinians and injuring hundreds more. Goldstein quickly established a fan base among the settlers. Hundreds attended his funeral, and many of them praised him as a hero and a saint. We urged Rabin to clear out the Hebron settlers. It would be a brave move that could restore the Palestinians' trust in the peace process. But the army generals claimed that vacating the settlers from Hebron could cause a civil war. Rarely have I seen Peres so determined to reach a decision that opposes the military.
יהודי שהוא רוצח, הוא רוצח, והוא איננו יהודי. יהודי שהוא נאצי, הוא נאצי, והוא לא יהודי. אדם שאמור היה להיות יהודי, בא מאחרי הגב, ותוקע כדורים בגבם של מתפללים במקום קדוש לערבים ולנו, מחסנית אחרי מחסנית. זוועה עוברת אותי. למי אני אשווה אותו? אשווה אותו לערפאת. אני לא רוצה להשוות אותו לאף אחד. נאמר שערפאת עשה שגיאות, ואני אומר, עשה שגיאות גם חטאים. אבל ברגע שהוא קם ואמר, הקץ למלחמות, אני מכיר בקיומה של מדינת ישראל ובזכותה לביטחון. ערפאת היום הולך ועליו מרחפת סכנת חיים, לפי דעתי. מפני שהוא החליט להפסיק את הרצח. אני לא מרחם. אני יש דאגה לילדים, ואני יודע שלילדים צריך פרטנר.
רק לך יש דאגה לילדים.
ואני מעוניין שערפאת יהיה פרטנר שיכול לעשות שלום.
רב לבנת, קורא אותך פעם שנייה. וזאת האחרונה אולי.
להוביל את עמו לשלום, ואני אומר כאן אמת, צריך פרטנר אמיתי, כמה שזה קשה, ולעזור לפרטנר הזה לצאת מהמשקעים של רצח ושגיאות וטרור, ולשבת יחד איתנו ולחפש דרך חדשה, לא לחזור על מה שהיה, לא לחזור על נחלי אדם, לא לחזור על חוסר המוצא, לא לחזור אל האין דרך ולתת לכל לרעוד, להתמוטט, להתעייף.
We were sure that as a result of the debate, the Jewish Israeli residents of Hebron will be taken away from this place. And I waited at home. I mean, it was Friday. I waited at home for another hour to hear the news, and in the news there was nothing. And I thought, what could happen? I mean, maybe it was a secret, maybe it happened and nobody informed about, maybe censorship. But of course, eventually, the decision was not to do that. It was really inconceivable. It was inconceivable.
The Palestinians demanded the settlements be cleared out. But Israel refused, and instead put the Arab residents of Hebron under lockdown. Once again, the victims were being punished.
When Oslo was signed, 82% of Palestinians supported Oslo. And they saw hope, and they gave every chance to get hope. And then, with their eyes, they continued to see business as usual. Settlement activities, incursions, demolishing farms, and so on, and so on, and so on, business as usual. This is the land that's supposed to be a Palestinian state. Why are they building settlements?
Our worst nightmare had come true. Arafat was torn between his people and the need to appease the Americans and the Israelis. He is slowly losing his credibility in the eyes of the Palestinians. He is losing control.
The people now are totally convinced with the attitude of Hamas after the massacres.
So what do you think will happen to Fatah, for example?
They are going to lose much of the support of the people who believed in Fatah at the time.
You know that people in Israel are really terrified of revenge now.
Yes, everybody is angry, actually, and it is expected for the revenge.
The Palestinian attacks began 40 days after the massacre in Hebron, exactly the 40 days of mourning. It was Afula and Hadera, and you see blood on the streets, and people are saying, this is the peace that you promised us. And you could not say, don't forget, it was only a DOP. What is DOP? What did it want? Wasn't there a ceremony with Arafat and Rabin and Clinton? Wasn't it peace?
On March 94, we headed back to the negotiating table. Since the wave of suicide bombings, Israel has put 2.5 million Palestinians under closure. Poverty was rising throughout the occupied territories, and living conditions declining. Our people were losing faith in the peace process. But I knew we must not give up.
בעתיד זה נושא לפתרון הקבע. כל החוכמה היום בכל המשא ומתן עם הפלסטינאים שלא עוסקים בנושאים המרכזיים של פתרון הקבע. אם נעסוק בעניין של פתרון הקבע היום, הכל יתפוצץ.
Despite the blood and the violence, the process had a force of its own. And on May 94, we set out to sign the Gaza-Jericho Agreement, granting the Palestinians self-rule in Gaza.
After 8 months of talks, the stage was finally set. Egypt President Mubarak provided a suitably dramatic setting for the ceremony in Cairo.
The morning of the signing of the Gaza-Jericho Agreement, Faisal and I were being interviewed in Jerusalem while watching a live broadcast of the ceremony. On my way to the interview, I was held up by the Israeli soldiers at the checkpoints. Someone said to me, "This is your idea of peace? Tell the old man not to sign. Tell him to come wait at the checkpoint and sign it here, along with the rest of us." I stared at the screen and wondered, is this a celebration of the birth of the peace process or its burial?
Both sides appeared to have sorted out differences over the Gaza Strip and Jericho, but within minutes it was clear that the deal, like the stage positions, was not going to plan.
Ladies and gentlemen, the signing of the Gaza-Jericho self-rule agreement.
And I'm sitting there and I see Arafat signing the documents, all the documents. And then the guy that assisted him brought the maps. He looked at them, opened, didn't sign, closed it, and went back to stand. And Rabin was walking to do the same. So I walk up the stairs and I stand next to Rabin. And as he begins to sign, I open it, and then I whisper in his ear without trying not to show any excitement, because everything was recorded and filmed. And I told him, Arafat did not sign the maps. So he says, so what does it mean? I responded, it means that there is no agreement.
Israel's Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin examines the documents, called over Foreign Minister Shimon Peres, and also refused to sign. For a while, it seemed as if the entire ceremony was about to collapse.
Because we had not been a part of that channel, we didn't fully appreciate what the gaps were between the two sides. Israel saw this as a devolution of power as the Palestinians proved themselves. Palestinians saw this as, we have to show this is a new day. And as a new day, we have to have all the trappings of statehood, even if we don't have it formally yet. So immediately they wanted, they didn't want controls over crossing points. They wanted immediately to say, the Israelis are out of our lives.
What happened with Arafat, that in all the negotiations, he says, la, la, la. He says, no, no, no. What I did, I was at very good terms with Mubarak. They wanted peace seriously. So I would go to them and says, again, he said no. They would call him up and said, stop it. Mubarak said it publicly once on the stage. He called him Ibn Kalb, the son of a bitch.
After a brief interval, the PLO leader was assured that the size of the Jericho region was still under negotiation. He signed the document and added a few comments. Finally, with the briefest of handshakes, a deal was done at the very last minute.
On July 1st, 1994, Yasser Arafat returned to his home and reclaimed his position as the Palestinian leader. It was an ambivalent return. He came back and had to govern Palestine, which was divided and driven apart. Or perhaps Israel brought him back in order to control him. What was the price we had to pay for his return home? Was this one of Oslo's minefields? Or was it the first step toward peace and the liberation of Palestine?
As we made our way to Palestine, my heart pounded, and I was choked with the emotion of the moment. I wept as I had never wept before, kissing and hugging all my relatives and friends. The last time I met my father in Jordan, I hinted that I might be coming home soon. He cried and raised his hand, swearing he will prepare a feast on my return. My sadness was that my father had passed away just 4 months earlier, after waiting to my return for so many years. Soon I called Uri. I said I am finally back in my childhood home. He greeted me with the Arab words of welcome, Ahlan wa sahlan, and told me he was truly pleased to hear my voice. We have become neighbors, at last.
One week after Abu Alaz returned to Abu Dis, we met once again in Taba. This time, in order to negotiate the second stage of the Oslo process, Israel's withdrawal from the West Bank. I spread out the maps we had kept secret until then. The Oslo Accord stated Israel will withdraw from most of the West Bank within a year, and the Palestinians were expecting to receive control over the land immediately. But Israel demanded a gradual withdrawal and offered the Palestinians full control on only 2% of the land. The remaining 98% will be controlled by the Israeli army. Arafat stared at the map silently, and then announced that it was an unbearable humiliation. "These are prison camps," he yelled. "You want to destroy me." With those words, Arafat left the room.
What you are suggesting deviates from the signed agreement, I shouted. You keep 98% of the land? We won't accept that. You can enforce this approach on Arafat and push him into a corner. But remember this, a one-sided agreement will not last.
Abu Alaz stood up without saying another word and summoned his driver. We exchanged a polite and cold handshake, and we each went our separate ways. As hours went by, we waited nervously in the hotel's lobby. Some Israeli reporters informed us that Arafat had issued a statement about the talks collapsing. We were all on edge, but refused to cave in.
עכשיו זה עניין של ההחלטה. רוצים הסכם או לא רוצים הסכם. שני נושאים עיקריים על הפרק, נושא חברון, נושא מפות. אני מניח שנדע, או תוך שעות, או תוך יום, או תוך ימים, אבל אנחנו בסיומו ממש של משא ומתן בשלב ההכרעה הסופית.
Later that evening, Arafat's personal assistant came rushing towards me. Arafat asked that you come to Abu Alaz's room immediately, she said. He's collapsed. I rushed to Abu Alaz's room and found him lying in bed, pale as a ghost, trembling, nodding in and out of consciousness. "Hold on, my friend," I whispered. "I need you to stay with me." The doctors found Abu Allah's collapse to be a result of extreme fatigue caused by the many hours of negotiations. But I knew the truth. The map I presented to him had broken his heart.
There was something very personal in peacemaking. It wasn't a political festival. It wasn't a political ambition. It was a very human ambition. There's a symbolic picture where people went to Israeli tanks in the streets and put olive branches. The tanks that destroyed your lives and your homes, the army that killed your kids and oppressed you. People went out and gave them flowers and gave them olive branches and felt that this was it. This is the end of the conflict. This is the end of the occupation. It was a moment of hope, a moment of promise, but people's hopes were dashed, and it didn't materialize into a reality. So yes, of course, I feel sad and responsible.
יום אחד אני נוסע למשרד, אומרים לי המאבטחים, היה פיצוץ אוטובוס, נסענו לשם. כל הכיכר הייתה שטופת דם, עדיין היו גופות, חלקי גופות, וילדות ובכי. היו שם אלפי אנשים. כשאני נכנסתי, התחילו לצרוח, רוצח, תראה מה שעשית לנו. בוגד, תראה מה שעשית לנו.
I had a meeting with Yair and Ron. We all felt that the time was running out and that we had to act fast. We agreed on deliberations that would lead to a permanent agreement, utilizing the same framework we used in Oslo: quick, discreet talks, and no empty slogans. Mahmoud Abbas and I deliberated over the drafts for almost 2 years. Behind the scenes, without the racket of the Taba Hotel, we touched on the most sensitive points of the process for the very first time. At least theoretically, we had a document in our hands with a comprehensive solution: a withdrawal to the 67 borders, the establishment of a Palestinian state, of course, keeping the settlement blocks intact, and making Jerusalem the capital of both nations. My plan was to set up a meeting with Rabin. I told him that I would like to meet with him about the permanent solution. And he said, as soon as possible. So I told him, let's do it when I return from the United States on Saturday, November 11th. No one could have guessed under what circumstances that meeting would take place.
On September 5th, we reassembled in Taba. I must admit, after our last encounter, I wasn't looking forward to another round of this endless boxing match. We were stressed, exhausted, and most of all, fed up. It was not long before the negotiation, once again, deteriorated to an exchange of accusations.
It was the nastiest meeting I've ever been in my life. We just wanted to be anywhere but in that room. As I was leaving the room, I turned around And the Israeli and Palestinian delegations are talking to each other and having a cup of coffee. I think it underscores the point that part of what happens in negotiations is the humanization of the other side. You no longer see just the quote-unquote enemy, but you see a person. And you learn about that person's family and their ups and downs and their happy moments, and you get a sense of how committed they are to peace. And you never are able to translate that to the public.
That evening, we improvised a Friday prayer service. We lit candles, and much to the astonishment of the Palestinians, Zinger recited the Kiddush prayer. We opened with Everybody Loves Saturday Night in 3 languages. Afterwards, Abu Ala and myself joked around by imitating the Peres and Arafat conversation, while Uzi taught us full how to sing My Yiddish Mame. It was nice to kid around again. Later that night, I received a call from Jerusalem. A bus exploded in the center of the capital. We sat and watched the news silently. No one said a word. No one doubted our Palestinian friends opposed terror, and that it was directed towards them as well. 2 days later, Abu Ala called me up from his room and asked me to watch the Arab evening news with him. We watched images of a 7-year-old boy's funeral, a boy who had been killed that day by the Israeli army. Abu Ala was right when he said that neither side has dominion over suffering. That night, Abu Ala and I reached the final draft of the Oslo B agreement.
הסכם אוסלו ב' במרכז המהדורה שלנו הערב. על ההסכם הזה חתמו אורי סביר מן הצד הישראלי ואבו עלה מן הצד הפלסטיני. על פי ההסכם ייסוג צה"ל מ6 ערים מרכזיות נוספות בגדה, נוסף ליריחו, והבחירות למועצה הפלסטינית יתקיימו ככל הנראה בחודש מרס.
זה יום של הישג, אומר יצחק רבין במצב רוח מרומם. הבוקר הוא הביא את הסכם אוסלו ב' לגמר חתימה. 5 שעות נמשך הדיון בממשלה שהוגדר על ידי השרים ישיבה היסטורית על הסכם היסטורי.
היום אנו שולטים על למעלה מ2 מיליון פלסטינאים באמצעות צה"ל ומנהלים חייהם על ידי מינהל אזרחי. אין זה פתרון של שלום. אנו יכולים להמשיך להילחם. אנחנו יכולים להמשיך להרוג ולהמשיך להיהרג. אבל אנחנו גם יכולים לנסות ולהפסיק את מעגל הדמים הבלתי נגמר הזה. אנחנו יכולים לתת סיכוי לשלום.
אתה, אדוני ראש הממשלה, התבטאת לפני ימים אחדים בצורה מזעזעת. התנ"ך אמרת, התנ"ך זה לא הטאבו שלנו. ואילו אני אומר, התנ"ך הוא הטאבו שלנו, הוא המנדט שלנו, הוא שטר הבעלות שלנו.
קהל אלפים אכן התאסף כאן כדי למחות נגד אישור הסכם הביניים ונגד מה שהמחנה הלאומי מכנה הפקרת הביטחון ונטישת חבלי מולדת.
אני שואל את הקהל העצום הזה, היש פה מישהו ביניכם שמאמין ליאסר ערפאת? אתם אומרים לא, אבל יש פה מישהו שאינו מתחשב בדעתכם. האדון רבין.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, His Majesty King Hussein of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, His Excellency Mohammed Hosni Mubarak, President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, His Excellency Yitzhak Rabin, Prime Minister of Israel, Chairman Arafat.
Please, take a good, hard look. The sight you see was impossible, was unthinkable just 3 years ago. Only poets dreamt of it. And to our great pain, soldiers and civilians went to their death to make this moment possible.
These were the years of hope, when the two peace camps felt that they were somehow vindicated, that they are bringing to their people the fruits.
באותו מלון, למטה, בחדר האחורי, מפגש ספונטני של ותיקי אוסלו אחד, ובהם החותמים, אבו עלה ואורי סביר.
Abu Allah, are you more optimistic now than you've been, let's say, one day after Oslo 1?
Yes, I am optimistic.
Yes?
I believe that the process we agreed together will continue, despite of all difficulties we face, but it will succeed later. We have a goodwill to push this process forward.
I concur with what Abu Allah says, and we really have no choice. And there's some good common language around this table, as you can see.
שיאו של היום בקבלת פנים חברתית של הסרת מחיצות אישיות. ועל הבמה לאה רבין מוסרת את מספר הטלפון שלה לגברת ערפאת, כימיה בין אנשים, ויצחק רבין לראשונה פונה אל ערפאת בנימה אישית בהומור.
What is a Jewish sport? And the saying is speech making. I start to believe, Chairman Arafat, that you are close to be Jewish.
It's my grandfather. It's my grandfather.
וערפאת מסתכל אל עיניו של יצחק רבין ועונה.
Our partner, our cousin, יצחק רבין.
ליצחק רבין ולשמעון פרס וליוסי בני ולחבריהם. אני אומר לכם, אנחנו נתגייס ואנחנו נצליח! אנחנו נצליח לעצור את הסכנה הזאת! אנחנו נצליח! כי העם הזה הרבה יותר חזק מהממשלה שלו.
Rabin and Arafat felt isolated in the hostile environment. The peace camp wasn't going out into the streets to protest. Instead, they chose to avoid confrontation. The peace objectors, Hamas on the Palestinian side, and the Greater Israel camp on our side, now owned public opinion. The face-off wasn't between Israel and the Palestinians, but between those who supported peace and those that objected to it.
רבין, אני רוצה לחזור למתנחלים. למה אתה אוהב להרגיז אותם?
על במה מאשימים אותי כעת? בהפקרת חייהם של המתנחלים. הרי פעם הסבירו שההתנחלויות זה תוספת ביטחון. איפה הביטחון? הבעיה שלנו היום לתת ביטחון למתנחלים.
אתה רואה בהם חלוצים במתנחלים?
בשום פנים לא.
אלא מה אתה רואה בהם?
אני רואה בהם אנשים שמגשימים את תפיסת עולמם הפוליטית. הם מאמינים בארץ ישראל השלמה. מה זה הציונות היום? איזה פיסטין על יד רמאללה? או הבאת 700,000 עולים וקליטתם בארץ? בניית חברה, כלכלה. לא עוד איזה יישוב קטן ומוקף במאות אלפים פלסטינאים.
In early October, John Friedman, a friend of Peres, convinced him to arrange a rally in support of the peace process. Peres urged Rabin to accept the initiative. But Rabin wondered, would people even leave their homes? Those days, Rabin was more pessimistic than ever.
If too much is heard in the Middle East from the few extremists, tonight the supporters of peace emerged in a huge rally in Tel Aviv. This is the young Israel, tired of army service, tired of chasing Palestinian stone-throwing children through refugee camps. All sides are mobilizing, for this is now becoming one of the most contentious moments in Israeli history.
For the first time, perhaps, the surprise is fading, and there is a popular momentum for peace.
זה היום המאושר ביותר בחייו. הכרתי אותו 50 שנה. אף פעם לא ראיתי אותו כל כך מאושר. הוא בא למקום עם הרבה מאוד ספקות, הוא לא ידע אם יגיע הרבה קהל, הוא לא ידע איך הקהל יתנהג. ולהפתעתו הנעימה באו המונים, וההתלהבות הייתה אדירה. נערים ונערות קפצו לבריכה עם הבגדים, והיללו ושיבחו אותו ואת השלום, קצת אותי. הכרתי אותו 50 שנה, אף פעם לא ראיתי אותו שר. זו הפעם הראשונה בחיי שראיתי שר. שנינו שרנו, שנינו לא זמרים מי יודע מה. ואחר כך הוא גם חיבק אותי כפי שלא חיבק אותי אף פעם אחת בחיים. ממש לא ראיתי כל כך מאושר, כמו בערב הזה.
תרשו לי לומר שאני גם מתרגש. אני רוצה להודות לכל אחת ואחת מכם שהתייצב כאן כנגד האלימות ובעד השלום.
כשנגמרה העצרת, אני התחלתי לרדת מדרגות. כשהגעתי, הרכב שלי עמד לפני הרכב שלו. ליד הרכב שלו עמד הנהג שלו. שאלתי אותו, איפה יצחק? הוא אומר, הנה כאן. אני מסתכל, הוא היה איזה 10 מטרים ממני, 12 מטרים ממני. נכנסתי לאוטו, הניעו את האוטו, רק סגרנו את הדלת, שמענו 3 יריות.
אם כן, אנחנו רואים עכשיו חומר בלתי ערוך שהגיע מכיכר מלכי ישראל, הפרטים שיש לנו עד כה. נורו יריות לעבר ראש הממשלה בכיכר מלכי ישראל, 3 יריות נשמעו שם. ארגון יהודי נוקם הודיע כי הוא ירה בראש הממשלה, ואנחנו עדיין אוספים פרטים, לא ברור לנו כרגע מה מצבו של ראש הממשלה.
נכנסתי לבית החולים, שם הייתה לאה, המשפחה וחברים קרובים. ומנהל בית החולים לקח אותי הצידה ואמר, מצב קשה מאוד, כמעט נואש. וכעבור כמה רגעים הוא בא ואמר לי שזה הסוף. לאה ואני נכנסנו לחדר שבו הוא היה מוטל על אלונקה, מכוסה סדין. ראינו את פניו, נח, שקט, אפילו עם קצת חיוך סרקסטי על השפתיים, או חיוך כזה של השלמה. נשקתי לו על המצח, ויצאתי.
You know, these people were fighting each other. They don't recognize each other. They kill each other and so on. It wasn't a play. But then later I saw Rabin's meeting with Arafat. I saw meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. I was there every single meeting. And I saw how the relationships developed. After the day when Rabin was assassinated, Arafat told me they assassinated the peace process in Israel. And I disagreed with him. No, Israel is not about an individual, it's about institutions, it's about this, have replacements and so on. And he did like this with his hand and told me they assassinated the peace process.
Peres was not himself. He was very sad, deeply sad. He was already the prime minister, and on Saturday, I came to his home with all the maps and all the material. And I said to him, this is the agreement that I have it with Abu Mazen. I think that we can go for it. You have the exact border, you have the solution for Jerusalem, everything else. And I think that now is the time. I mean, everybody is so confused, including ourselves, but still there is a support for peace, even more than before, as a result of the assassination. And let us use it for his memory and finish the job. And he listened to me very carefully for 2 hours. And then he said, not now. Not now. I don't think that people are ready to leave the Jordan Valley, which was part of the map, so that Israel should withdraw from the Jordan Valley. And I think that today to bring it to the people is immature. Well, it is always immature, but this is an opportunity. I was not strong enough to tell him, it is your biggest mistake, reconsider it. I did not come again to him with this. And maybe it is in me. Maybe it is part of my weakness. Maybe it was just a mistake, I don't know. But if you ask me whether I regret, I do regret it. I had apparently to fight more for the permanent agreement.
On May 5th, 1996, I found myself back in the familiar surroundings of the Hilton Taba. I wondered about the 3 years that passed since I first met Abu Allah in Oslo. Since then, our lives had become a combination of promise and anguish. The process we started had withstood tremendous trials. Since the first day in Oslo and up until this current exchange in May '96, 1,100 days of peace talks had passed. When we said our farewells that day, I never imagined that it would be my last and final meeting with Abu Allah in my official role as head of the Israeli negotiating team. If I had known it was all going to end, maybe I would have come up with something more intelligent to say to him. But all I said to Abu Allah was, "See you soon, my friend."
Nearly 80% of Israel's 4 million voters streamed to polling stations. Everyone seemed to understand why this election was important. In suburban Tel Aviv, voters chose Peres.
The peace process means hope that he won't be in a bloody army or in a bloody war.
In the West Bank city of Hebron, Jewish settlers voted for Netanyahu.
Peres wants to give our land to the Arabs, so of course we are voting for Benjamin Netanyahu.
Tonight, those who support the steps Israel has taken toward peace are clinging to the hope that they may be the ultimate winners.
ערב טוב ושבת שלום, עכשיו זה רשמי, מהפך בבחירות 1996. ראש הממשלה הבא הוא בנימין נתניהו. הוא קיבל 50.4% מהקולות, לעומת שמעון פרס שקיבל רק 49.5%.
ראש הממשלה בנימין נתניהו, ראש הממשלה המיועד בנימין נתניהו, עכשיו עולה ויישא את נאומו.
It's like someone building a bridge and building and building and building something that could have really changed the Middle East. And an opportunity like this comes once in 100 years, and it was wasted. I felt so bad when it all collapsed, because I held it already, and I felt we can do it, and then it went wrong, and I knew it's not in my lifetime, probably not in my kids' lifetime, maybe the grandchildren.
ידידים, רעים, חברים, מדינת ישראל יוצאת היום לדרך חדשה.
وأنت تعد فطورك فكر بغيرك لا تنس قوت الحمام وأنت تخوض حروبك فكر بغيرك من يطلبون السلام وأنت تسدد فاتورة الماء فكر بغيرك من يرضعون الغمام وأنت تعود إلى بيتك فكر بغيرك لا تنس شعب الخيام وأنت وأنت تنام وتحصي الكواكب فكر بغيرك من لم يجد حيزا للمنام وأنت تحرر نفسك بالاستعارات فكر بغيرك من فقدوا حقهم في الكلام وأنت تفكر بالآخرين البعيدين فكر بنفسك قل ليتني شمعة في الظلام ليتني شمعة في الظلام.
Are you still an optimist? Do you still believe there's a chance for peace between us and the Palestinians?
I don't think there's another alternative, neither for the Palestinians nor for us. The only alternative is an ongoing war. But contrary to what people think, in war there are no victories, only victims. No war is ever finished unless it's being replaced by peace.
ليتني شمعة في الظلام ليتني شمعة في الظلام قل ليتني شمعة في الظلام ليتني شمعة في الظلام ليتني 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 شمعة في الظلام ليتني 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 شمعة في الظلام.